Hello, everyone. How do you replicate standing in your favorite club waiting for the band to start? You start 10 minutes late. Sorry about the delay, y'all. We were working out some technical difficulties. Before we really get rolling, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about why we're here at Words and Music, because so many of you are watching from around the country right now that might not be familiar with what Words and Music is doing. This is a 4-day celebration of New Orleans arts and artists, but the proceeds from Words and Music go to support One Book, One New Orleans year-round community literacy and adult education initiatives. So what we do is we pick one book every year, and we encourage everyone in the city to read the same book at the same time, with the idea that we're going to grow stronger as a community through a shared reading experience. But if we're going to do that, we have to recognize that in New Orleans, the functional illiteracy rate among our adults is very much higher than the national average. So in order to bring into the fold folks who would normally be excluded from a community of readers, we develop a curriculum around our selected book every year, and we give that book and its curriculum free of charge to adult education programs, which could be adult ESL programs, programs for adults preparing for their HISET, which is the GED in Louisiana, programs for low literate adults. We also get the books into the hands of incarcerated adults and incarcerated teens. So our book and its curriculum are being used to lift up the literacy rate of our adult population. We also make sure that for those of us who can read, but who poverty may be a barrier to accessing books, that you can get our book for free at the New Orleans Public Library. We make sure that every branch has 3 or 4 copies. And then last but not least, a partnership with WRBH Reading Radio helps get that book every year into the ears of the blind and print handicapped, because they record that book and they broadcast it cover to cover. We're really fortunate to be with our community partners. Thank you all for your continued work to make New Orleans a more literate city. So when you all registered, there was the option to donate, and that's what your donations are supporting. It's not just the festival, it's the year-round work that goes on every single day for One Book, One New Orleans. So thank you all very much for those of you who made those donations. For those of you who haven't yet, it's still not too late. Thank you so much for attending this panel at this 4-day celebration of New Orleans arts and artists. And I'm really excited to introduce you to the moderator for this panel, who has been the heartbeat of so many New Orleans celebrations, Melissa A. Weber, aka DJ Soul Sister. She's born and raised here in New Orleans, and she's a Black music scholar who teaches the history of urban music at Loyola University's New Orleans College of Music and Media. For the past 2 decades as DJ Soul Sister, she's hosted her Soul Power show on WWOZ-FM here in New Orleans. She was the first DJ to win a Big Easy Entertainment Award and has performed with artists ranging from Questlove to George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic. Her extensive collection of over 10,000 records earned her a spot on the book Dust and Grooves, Adventures in Record Collecting. Weber's also written for the Journal of Popular Music Studies, Wax Poetics, and liner notes for labels such as Vinyl Me Please. She's presented papers at numerous conferences, such as the Pop Conference and the Dayton Funk Symposium at the University of Dayton. Melissa, thank you so much for bringing your interviewing prowess to Words and Music this year. I just saw Melissa interview George Clinton. And if this interview is half as spectacular, see, I'm getting all choked up just talking about it, spectacular as that one, then we are in for a treat. Without further ado, Melissa A. Weber.
Thank you very much, Megan, for that introduction. And yeah, hello and greetings, everyone, to all who have joined us in the audience and to the panelists who I'm so honored to be able to speak with today along with you. So again, I'm Melissa Weber, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this special panel on the final day of the Words and Music Literary Festival. It is titled I Ain't Much on Casanova, because we're going to do a deep dive oral history of the hit song Casanova, originally recorded and released by legendary R&B group LeVert in 1987. And also we're going to talk about the legacy of that song, which finds some interesting intersections here in New Orleans, where I am. So first, I will introduce everyone, and then we will get into the conversation. Joining us today are Kelly Harris-DeBerry, whose recent article for 64 Parishes magazine titled Oh Casanova, How a Cleveland R&B Song Became a New Orleans Brass Band Staple, is the inspiration for our panel today. Kelly is a poet and the author of Freedom Knows My Name. She was recently awarded a Vindy Award from the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance for We Are the Holy Ones. We also have Micheal Ferguson, the former music director for LeVert, and as part of numerous national concert tours. He began his entertainment marketing career as a marketing representative for GMR Marketing on the Luther Vandross Power of Love tour for Miller Brewing Company's $25 million marketing music campaign. And he has over 20 years experience in experiential marketing, special event production, and content for clients such as premier Fortune 500 companies. We also have Marc Gordon, founding member and the last surviving member of the group LeVert. As an award-winning writer and producer, he's also worked with Anita Baker, Mickey Howard, Stephanie Mills, Music Soul Child, and more. And he was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. And then finally, Keith Frazier, the bass drummer and founding member of Rebirth Brass Band, which he formed with his brother, Philip Frazier, in 1983 at Joseph S. Clark Senior High School in New Orleans. Since then, the Rebirth Brass Band has become the standard of contemporary brass band music, inspiring and influencing legions of younger brass bands to follow in their footsteps, while in 2012, becoming the first New Orleans brass band to win a Grammy Award, which they received in the category of Best Regional Roots Music Album. So welcome to all of the panelists, and let's get into it. And I want to invite and encourage you who are joining us in the audience to add your comments and especially your questions in the chat box throughout our talk. At the end, there will be a Q&A session, and we will be keeping track of all of your questions. Okay. I would like to start with Marc Gordon by asking you how LeVert began. Take us from the beginning, and once more, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we were, young guys that was just in love with the music, and we followed our heart and, and developed, a group and sound, and it went from there. So, just some guys from Cleveland, Ohio, trying to make it happen.
So I have this album, I Get Hot. Do y'all see everybody? Tell us about you all being young and wanting to start and how that happened.
Well, it took a while for Eddie to take us in the studio, to take us serious. He didn't really believe that we were ready. So it took us quite a while for us to get in the studio. And once he did take us to the studio, me and Joe wrote a song, and we showed him the song. And after we showed them the song, the studio was at Walt's house. And after we showed them the song, they kicked us out the studio. So that was our very first experience in the studio. They was like, all right, y'all guys, y'all beat it. You know what I mean? Like, so I was kind of disappointed. I thought I was going to hang out with the crew and kick it. But, he had all his crew at the studio, and they put together our first recording song, and they, developed it. And when we heard it again, it was like, wow, they took this song from, just from scratch to a whole other thing. So it was like, that was our first experience in the studio.
Okay, cool. That album I held up was from 1984. So first album. And when you said Eddie, for those who don't know who Eddie is.
Yeah, Eddie LeVert, my bad.
Eddie LeVert of the OJs, and then your fellow LeVert band members, Gerald LeVert and Sean LeVert, who were the sons of Eddie LeVert.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Michael, what is your relationship with getting involved in LeVert? Because when I look on the back of this album, I think you're in here. You're also credited on bass. So tell
I
us
am.
Can't hide from that.
Right, can't hide. It's yeah. Well, I grew up. It's funny. I met Gerald and Sean first. They moved in the neighborhood that I lived in, and Gerald was at 6 years old, working, trying to really become who he ultimately became. And so, and he and Sean and my brother actually did a little show in the in the driveway. They were just learning how to do it, and so and I always say he was one of the hardest working guys because he wanted to rehearse and write songs as a little kid. So I met them then, and then I went away to college and came back. And by that time, it's right when, as Mark is talking about, they were a little more ready to make records. And so, I started with the band early, and we started doing all the things that we needed to do to make records and be a legitimate act. And I think they did a pretty good job with it.
From that first album from 1984 to let's skip all the way to 1987. So 1984, that first album didn't yield any hits, but if we poured 1987 with the album The Big Throwdown, that's the album with Casanova. So what is the story behind the song Casanova? How y'all got it? How you recorded it? How did it wind up on the album?
Well, the very first, before we got to Casanova, we did an album. Our first album on Atlantic was called Bloodline, and that consisted of our first song going #1 called Pop Goes My Mind. So the next album, which was The Big Throwdown, Sylvia decided that she wanted to give us a little funky sound, give us a little upbeat sound. And she pulled in a few producers, but she pulled in the Calloway brothers, who were also from Ohio, and they were part of Midnight Star. And they gave us, we heard the song at the office at Atlantic, and it was a go from there. That song probably was the hardest song for Gerald to sing, unbelievably, because he, the Callaways, Reggie Calloway was kind of particular on how he wanted it to be sung. Gerald was a free spirit, and he just, he would go in and just drop all kind of lines and jewels and think all of them supposed to work. Reggie wasn't having that, so Reggie made him do stuff over and over and over and over and over and over. It was the longest session he had probably ever had in doing vocals, and we did multiple stacked background vocals and this and that. So that was how the song became. And it was really more so the beat, but the rest of it was catchy. But I think the beat was more so the driving force of the song.
Okay. Who arranged the music for the song?
Reggie Calloway. They were the writers and producers of the song.
Okay. And who decided that it would become a single? When you said Sylvia, is that Sylvia Rome?
Sylvia Rome, Atlantic Records at the time, yes. And so that was kind of like the breakout song for that record. and it elevated us to a next level after having our debut single, go as good as it did. It elevated us to another level, went top 5 pop, and it was heard around the world. And it was a great addition to our career.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. I remember that. And just so that people have a little bit of context around the song, if perhaps they may not have heard the song, I'm going to ask Candace to pull up the live Showtime at the Apollo, I believe 1987 video, so that we can see just a few moments of this, and also the crowd interaction too. That's why I really like this video. So, yes. Oh, we can't. There we go.
Song Casanova. Me and Romeo ain't never been friends. Can't you see how much I really love it? I wanna sing it to you, time. Everybody sing my song. Come on. Oh, Casanova. Casanova.
Yes. A little bit of Casanova live from LeVert Showtime at the Apollo TV show. And when y'all performed that song, I mean, obviously for the TV show, there was a lot of excitement in the audience, but I must imagine that was a favorite when you all would perform live in various places.
Oh yeah, that was always the closer of the show. And it always got the party, started and going, and after party, whatever. It was always the fat finale to the thing. So yeah, it was it was definitely a hit. I
want to pivot to Kelly Harris-DeBerry and the article that you wrote. Tell us about the inspiration. Why an article dedicated to O Casanova?
I wanted to, can I piggyback on Reggie Calloway just for a second? Absolutely. Because I want to connect a few dots that I think are important to understanding how the song has traveled. And we have to remember that Reggie Calloway was a trumpet player. And I think that is an interesting connect when we think about New Orleans. But if we look even deeper into pre-New Orleans, even pre-Cleveland, and talking about Cincinnati and the foundation and the regional influence of funk in Cincinnati and that Dayton area, Calloway went to school with a great pianist who, in grammar school, who we now know was Fred Hirsch, right? The great pianist. He went to a HBCU, Kentucky State University. I saw an interview with him where he talks about opening for Natalie Cole for one of the homecomings. So, and then Cincinnati, you got King Records there, you got Bootsy, you got, Catfish, you got all of these things that are in earshot of Cleveland. So when we talk about the navigation of the song, it's important that we kind of understand the region part of it too, and just how what was happening that kind of birth and rebirth this song in many ways. So for me, when I moved to New Orleans, I don't know how many years ago, it's been a while now, I remember even visiting the city, hearing brass bands play Casanova. And for me, it was wait a minute, I know that song, but I don't know it this way. And I felt kind of frozen in time because I was experiencing it the New Orleans way, but I was also seeing myself and seeing my brother, and his friends be LeVert and talent shows, right? And, being on Euclid Avenue and all of those things. So I had like one foot in Cleveland and one foot in New Orleans. And so I, as a poet, as a writer, I'm always believing that songs have stories, that there's always some story. So I just began digging for like, what's the story with this? And so that's really like how it started. And so I didn't know much about like if there really was a story, if this was just something that New Orleans had done. I mean, New Orleans is always kind of embracing other artists and making home for them, whether it's like Frankie Beverly or, all those kind of things that New Orleans adopts musically. So I talked to some people. I started just digging around in Cleveland. And this was like during the pandemic time. Like I called the Rock Hall, other folks, it was like really hard to try to find the dots. And so a good friend of mine, Janice Lowe, I think she's watching, said, she gave me two names, Michael and this other guy. She was like, but you probably will never get Michael because Michael's busy, but try this other person. Well, that other person never responded, and Michael responded instantly. So, I started talking to him, and then I knew I wanted to talk to Rebirth. But then by the time I got to Keith, there was that snowstorm in the South, right? And like people's lights were out. And so there was like all these crazy things happening to try to make the story and try to get the story there. So I'm glad that we're able to talk about it because I couldn't put it all in the word counts. So thank you for doing this. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah. I'm going to get back to that about what could not be included in the word counts in a few moments. But I want to get Keith Frazier in on this, Keith of Rebirth Brass Band. And so Kelly's piece states, it is widely believed that Rebirth is responsible for making Casanova a song that every New Orleans brass band had to learn. Keith, tell us about how... why that song and how that song became part of your repertoire.
Well, as you guys were all saying, when we first heard the song, it was a very popular song. And I actually heard the song when I was going to Grambling State University because we played in the marching band. My brother Philip, who had previously went to Grambling in 1984, he knew about the song, but he didn't really know about it until he heard LeVert doing it on a record. And my brother Philip, he likes to do songs that have really good bass lines. So he heard the bass line of the song. He said, we could adapt this song to a brass band song. So he was just messing around playing the song. He played the bass line part to it, and a couple of guys who were playing trumpet, trombone, sax, they learned the word part of it as the horn part. And so we were playing at a place called Kemp's one night, and a guy by the name of Reginald Stewart and myself, we were having a conversation, and we were talking about this young lady. She's a beautiful young lady. He was like, I would like to get with that lady. I said, what would you tell her? And he said, I would tell her, hey, bend over, like we were saying in New Orleans. And so we go into Casanova, and like we do a lot of times, we would just improvise words for a song. And Philip said, man, let's play Casanova now. He's playing the bass line. The guy started playing the vocal part to it. And we get to a break in the song, and he just starts saying, hey, girl, bend over, as if saying, hey, Casanova. And we kind of married those lyrics with the song Casanova. At the time, it was an okay song, but the more we played it, the more popular it became for people coming to see us at Kemp's and at Second Lines. But Casanova was already hit. We just kind of like added that to our repertoire of songs because we knew it would fit well with what we do. It was the call and response that in the beginning of Casanova that you would hear. We use that, and the bass line, it was just real groovy. From the moment Phil heard it, he was like, yeah, man, that's it. Like, yeah, we would just continuously play it every Thursday night, and people would love it because they already knew the song from the radio, from LeVert, doing that song, and it just happened to be one of those things where it popped. And now to this day, it's still one of the most popular songs that we have, no matter where we play or who we play for. As a matter of fact, we just played Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, and this was at a theater, and older people, they love the song. They're like, is that song a Rebirth song? We said, no, actually, that's a LeVert song that we just adopted to the brass band style of music, and it just happened to pop, like I said.
Yeah. Candace, let's listen to a little bit of Rebirth Brass Band's version of Casanova from the timestamp. Thank you. Here we go. I hate to end right there because we have time limit, but you know, if you, for anyone who is looking at the album cover, and also Keith, that recording came out on your 2001 album Hot Venom, which was kind of a shift for Rebirth Brass Band. There was a parental advisory label on it with explicit lyrics. And without getting into the explicit lyrics, you kind of hinted a little bit on what Rebirth's remix of Casanova was and kind of why it's very popular. So can you, in like PG terms, describe the Rebirth remix of
Well, to keep it in PG terms, you know, being from New Orleans, we have a lot of provocative sayings that we have down here, you know, like that have been going on for hundreds of years with brass bands. So we just decided that the song Casanova is talking about a guy who's a Casanova, a lover. And so if he's a lover, we have to talk about things that a lover would do. And so that kind of took hold with New Orleans, because during Mardi Gras season, you may hear stuff and see stuff that's very provocative, and the song just kind of fit with the entire, you know, lifestyle of New Orleans. So like Casanova, Mardi Gras, lovers, and so the words had to be provocative. And like I said, we were having a conversation that night about a young lady, and it was a very provocative type of situation, and it just happened to all fit together. And we were just thankful that the group LeVert had put together a song that was as popular as it was, something that we knew could fit to horns and the brass band, and here we are almost 25, 30 years later, and it's still being requested.
Yeah. Melissa, can I just wanted to say one thing. When we talk about the beat, I think Mark was talking about the beat, and Keith is talking about, you know, what they did with the music. You know, talking to Baba Luther, for y'all who don't know who Baba Luther is, he's our master African drummer in the city. And he talked about the when you slow Casanova down, especially the LeVert version in the beginning, when you slow it all the way down, he's played it for me on the African drum. The thing that marry both versions is the African rhythm that is underneath that, the beat. Right. And so that is one thing that, you know, even going back to slavery, when we were separated and kidnapped and all of those things, and we lost our language, our music was scattered as well, but it always returns to us in different forms. And so I think that's what we see here. Even, you know, in Jamaica, they have a reggae version. You know, DC, they do it in the go-go style. So that beat is the like natural common language of every city where Black people are. So I wanted to say that because I think that's really important, that glues it together. But also when we talk about PG version, someone asked me, you know, they didn't think maybe Gerald LeVert would like, you know, the X-rated version. And I had to remind them, well, he did have an album called The G-Spots. So you know, from what I know about Gerald LeVert, you know, I know that he loved to kick it, but I wanted to say that, you know, and Keith can talk about this a little bit more, you know, that he didn't mean, Rebirth didn't mean any harm by it. You know, when we
no, not at all.
Talked about that. So, you know, we have twerking, we have all these things that are native to New Orleans, and they just come out in the music, I think. Hopefully not around the children.
No. We actually have a clean version of it as well. But because of the places that we normally play in New Orleans, mostly adult places and bars and stuff, they want to hear the X-rated version.
So, Mark and Michael, did you all know that Casanova had become a New Orleans second line parade and brass band classic?
Yeah, I'm in New Orleans a lot, so I have heard it. I'm down there every year. I haven't been there since pandemic, but I'm there a lot, and I've always been fascinated by by the brass bands just in general. And then I can't remember when the first time is that I heard Casanova, but I've heard it, and it's fascinating to hear it, and especially so many years later for us. I'm not sure that I heard it close to when we had it out, but over the years that I've been there, to hear it and hear that kind of adaptation of it, and I think Kelly made the interesting point around the actual musical connection from African rhythms and just what moves you when you hear it again in another form. It just kind of tells you, one, you were on the right track, but to hear that rendition of it for me was great, and especially having learned all that I've learned about the culture in New Orleans and kind of how that came. It's fascinating to see it come together that way, and I think they did a really good job of it, and to hear it every time I come down there, and other songs as well that they've done. It's just a fascinating thing for me. So I think it's a great thing, and it helps to keep things going.
Yeah.
Cool. What about you, Mark? Have you heard the brass band versions before, or is this like brand new?
Yeah. I haven't heard it in New Orleans. I don't think I can't remember that, but I surf online, so I hear different things when I see, like, I've seen high school bands and different bands play some of the music, Pop and Casanova and other songs. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing, because you're talking about a song that's close to 30 years old, and it is still evolving. It's been done over by pop acts. It's been done by a lot of different people, been covered. So
Reggae acts.
Callaway getting his money. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I've heard it in Jamaica.
And there's a Zydeco version that like took me out, when I heard that, and I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
So I think, back to that common language of beat that's in us, and the way that the region where you are, because Casanova lives a certain way in New Orleans, but when you go other parts of Louisiana, it's the Zydeco version that hits for people. And so I'm very fascinated with how where you are impacts how you hear a song. And so the other thing is, when we think about Black music, oftentimes the narrative is that things happen in the South and they go north, right? Or people left the South and they go north. But in this case, this was like a song that traveled south. And so that was always interesting to me, in this kind of idea of reverse migration, that it's not only traveled south, but it's traveled to Jamaica and, other places, so it's just really, I think, a gift. But yeah, and for me, many New Orleans that I knew didn't know that it was an original brass band song, right? So, I mean, I'm still getting emails like, I never knew that it was not original to New Orleans. So, being from Cleveland, I always want to try to wink the city, that I was born in. So that, I guess, was probably another reason for doing the piece, but trying to bring both cities together to have, just to show the gumbo, if you will, of it, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's just the musical, like when you talking about the different regions and how, like, Zydeco from go-go, from, what I mean? Like, we got to admit that we are the most creative people in the world. So we've come up with different versions and interpretations of the same song and can groove to all of them,
Yeah.
No, this is what keeps me going musically, is just the fact that, you know, putting together something from scratch, and it just comes as an idea, and then it develops into a song, to something that turns out like this, is just an unbelievable feeling. You know what I mean? So, you know, I could never just get away from the creative side of just music, because that's really what it's all about. You know, that drum that you speak about is the most important thing, because lyrically, like, they changed the lyrics to it, you know what I mean? But it's that drum, and you hear the overtones of the horns kind of playing the background of it, but it's that drum, and they changed the lyrics. So it's really, you know, the interpretation of that drum, which is definitely key. Because I don't know how far, like, the Casanova theme translates to different cultures, as far as people sang along with it because it was a hit. But it's that drum that really drove the song.
Yeah, I agree.
The bass line is also the interval of the bass line, which is a fourth interval, is about as African as you get. And I think that carries too. The drum is definitely important, but the interval on that bass line, the first couple notes, is something that if you listen across the world, it's an infectious interval.
Yeah.
And is used in a lot of stuff. So I think it's no wonder that the song carried the way it did, not only as its own record, but was easily picked up. On the bass line, from a trombone perspective, it makes total sense when you look at the interval and then look at all music. That's another thing. It's a common interval rhythm in African music and music period. It works. It does something, you know, to people, and it always will.
And Mike, you remember during our shows, of course Casanova would close the show, but during the show, toward the end of the show, the vamp, we would vamp out, and it would break down into kind of a Jamaican Caribbean deal.
We went reggae on it.
You know, so when I hear the other, like, styles, and even the brass band style, that's similar to what we was breaking it down to.
Yeah.
And we just partied from there on. So it was like, you know,
exactly.
It was easy to break it down into that, you know, let's emphasize those drums a little bit more and get everybody to, you know, crowd participation and all of that. So it was,
it
you know, it was just one of them things. As just like, you know, the OJs with Money, Money, Money.
Yeah.
When that came on, it was like everybody knew, like, this is it right here. Even though they got a million songs, but it's that song that always closed the show the best.
Yeah, the reaction that we got from that breakdown was always priceless, and it was why, you know, and Mark, you remember we would test something out a couple times. If we didn't feel it, it would get scrapped. We never scrapped that one. Kept going.
No, he never scrapped.
We closed that.
It might have changed a little bit, but it didn't.
Yeah,
it never went away. We, you know, we had fun at the end of that.
Right, because it worked with the audience, which is what you want to do when they're paying ticket money to see you perform. So we stuck with what worked. We may have varied it here and there, but that worked.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because we actually use Casanova as one of our closing tunes, along with Do What You Want. I call it the Big Three. We have 3 songs that we play no matter what, where we are, who we playing for. Casanova's in that mix of the Big Three, and it's a closer. You can play that, and I don't care what you play, the other 10 songs. If you play that, you're good.
Yeah,
all over the world.
And like you all said, that drum cadence and the bass interval just works.
Yeah,
it motivates people. So
just to pivot even to that point about the power of Casanova in New Orleans, the Rebirth version expanded and inspired yet another New Orleans classic. So I'm going to ask Candace to play a little bit of Knock With Me, Rock With Me by the Little Rascals Brass Band. This came out also in 2001. and listen for the similarities in the songs.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3,
Yes, other guys
So
Oh yeah,
a little bit of another song by the Little Rascals brass band.
that bass line, man.
Yeah, they got that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a widely used interval. I mean, you study anything.
And they emulated the vocal that we had in the beginning and used that as the horn part.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's really another interpretation, but they twisted it and did their thing with it,
And I want to throw in, even in the mix of that, the influence of Casanova on New Jack, on like the New Jack swing sound, because that beginning, dun, 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 and then the next year you have dun, 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 dun. You have Bobby Brown's My Prerogative, that same hard beat. You have like that Teddy Riley beat, and then LeVert goes on to do work with Heavy D. What's that?
Just cooling.
Just cooling.
Cooling.
Yes, just cooling. So you have the African rhythms in there, but you also have the kind of seeds of hip hop and the merging of R&B and that heartbeat, coming into fruition, in that late 80s, early 90s time as well. So I just wanted to throw that in. But I want to pivot back to one more thing about New Orleans and thinking about Gerald LeVert. I think I was in college early, maybe a freshman or something, when he died, and I got a chance to cover that, his funeral. And for me, both Gerald and Sean are gone, but the fact that this song is constantly played in New Orleans is in the tradition of honoring those that have gone on, right? And so that song, every time I hear that song, it is almost like a little second line, for them. It goes on, and that song just keeps lifting them up, their memories up, in New Orleans, and so this New Orleans place that uses music to also honor those that have gone on it probably, maybe Rebirth didn't intend that when it was doing the song, but it has all these other implications that are native to not just New Orleans, but to us as a people. So I wanted it connects definitely on a spiritual level.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and like I said, as much as time as I spend in New Orleans, I really love the culture in New Orleans and how it's been preserved and how much the people of New Orleans have that pride in it. And you hear that whenever you hear that music. And it then, for me, reminds me of the foods and every cultural thing that I've learned about that city and that region ties together through the music. And I don't think it's just because I'm a musician. I think it's a feeling that people get, even if you've never played an instrument before.
Yeah.
Well, it's the birthplace for so many. You know what I mean? So it's definitely rich in musical history and the food, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, that culture is unique, and And again, I'm at the jazz festival every year. I've done the Mardi Gras, I've done all of it, and so to hear that music that way, it has probably more and more meaning to me every time I'm down there because I know a lot of families there, generations, and for being someone who's not from there, I've learned a lot about it. And my boys down there always tell me I'm the adopted one. And no, I'll tell you a story. No matter where they go in the world, they always have somebody with that big pot in the driveway, and they get the crawfish, and they look, and we were all in Detroit once, man, and my all of us went up to Detroit for a fight party. I woke up one morning and the doorbell rang. Went to the door. There was a FedEx guy there. A box came in. I didn't know what it was, but I just sat it in the kitchen. And when my other boy came out, who I call him the chef of the group, he was excited to see the box because he had shipped that box from New Orleans the day before and sent sausage and all red beans and all that stuff from New Orleans to Detroit to make gumbo and jambalaya. And I asked him, I said, man, don't they have beans and sausage in Detroit? He was like, nah.
Not the same. It's not the same.
He FedExed all that stuff up the day before and got on a plane and had him meet him in the morning. And I realized just how deep that goes for them, that you can't just buy any sausage anywhere to make the gumbo they make the way they make it.
Right.
And when Katrina hit, they went to Atlanta, and I was there at that time, and they called me and told me, hey, man, we're in Atlanta. And I was asking them if they were all right because we were watching the news, and, obviously it was a bad thing. And they all told me, man, we got a pot of gumbo and a fifth of Crown. We're cool. So, I mean, I have these experiences with my friends in New Orleans where it's like they're resilient. And no matter what they've gone through, they stick together, and their culture kind of warms them up and sets them up to do it and deal with whatever it is they have to deal with. And I think that's very powerful. So
now you're making me hungry now.
I'm sure I am. I'm making myself hungry.
I think this is a place for us to connect with the audience and all of the questions that have been coming in the chat. And to everybody watching, if you have more questions, please put them in the chat box. But let's start with some of the ones that have come in so far. Okay, JG says, my question is for Keith. Who first sang the Take 'em Off refrain we always sing in New Orleans during the brass band versions?
Well, like I said, myself and Reg, we were just messing around, talking about this young lady. He was talking about it more than I was. And Take 'em Off is actually something that you would hear during Mardi Gras if you walk down Bourbon Street. And we, like I said, we just coming up with stuff. And in the middle of the song, it just happened. Like, take them off, take an MF and whatever. It just went along with what we were talking about. That's pretty much when it started. That was maybe in 91, 92, 90, something like that. Because we didn't actually record our version of Casanova until 2000 something. So, but we had been playing the song and saying those words since 90 something.
Okay. And Jarvis says, did Mark and Michael have any idea when the song was recorded what a big hit they had?
I'll tell you my version of that. For Mark, I think has a different, because he was recorded. We in the band, we didn't hear it until they got back with it. And at that time, when we were doing shows prior to us cutting that record, in those days, Prince, Cameo, those are the bands that were really popular then. We were playing that music quite a bit. So this song was nothing like that. And so when we first heard it, we weren't 100% sure about the song. We thought it was cool, but it wasn't like the stuff we had been playing. And but after hearing it for a while, and and it became one of the biggest hits. So I learned there's a lot of groups sometimes don't necessarily like the record that the record company gives them at first, and it can become the hit that changes your life. So
Yeah.
So no, I didn't know at first that it would be that as big as it has become. I don't know. Mark might feel a little differently about it, but that was my take on it.
Yeah, I didn't know for sure. You know, all of this was kind of new, so I wasn't in the. You know, I felt good about it, but you know, I'd say that the record company and you know, the execs and people that was promoting it. So you know, I just went along with what was happening. Like, oh, I feel good about it too. Like, you know, I don't know how it's gonna do, but you know, hey, I'm glad it's, you know, I'm glad if it do something, you know, and
We glad
you
it did
know,
what it did.
yeah, we glad it did what it did. But as young writers and producers, you know, at that age, at that stage, we wanted to do everything, you know, and so you know, it took us, you know, some humility to, you know, we had to take baby steps to get to where we were going. And, you know, so everything that we done, we like initially, we weren't the producers coming out, but as time went on, and I want to say Just Coolin' was our first, first record that, first album that we did ourselves completely, but we were happy that it did what it did, because it definitely you know, it was part of the journey of a long list of songs that end up doing and making some noise. So I'm glad that it's a part of the repertoire.
Okay, we have one more question that came in. Mandisa says, Kelly, please discuss your research process that connected all the dots in the article.
Yeah, so it was kind of just digging in crates, digging for articles, digging through interviews, YouTube, calling people on the phone the old-fashioned way. Like, I remember talking to someone, not even about this piece, and they mentioned something about Casanova and playing Casanova, and I was like, you might be of help to me, you know? And so then that person was like, well, I don't really know, but you should call so-and-so. Then that person was like, well, he living with his grandma now down the 7th Ward. I don't know, he don't got no phone, but you got to call and knock on the, you know, do the, you know, Fred Sanford, knock, whatever, you know, passcode. So like all these things that, in trying to, as a writer, you have to understand how the culture works, right? Like you can't go into it as a journalist per se. You have to go into it just being open to what the culture and what the musicians and artists can give you. I mean, at one point, Michael texts me and says, hey, are you on Clubhouse? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't really use it. He like, well, you need to get on because there's a whole Clubhouse right now dedicated to Gerald LeVert in Cleveland, right? So I jump on and he's like, you know, and next thing I know, I'm being brought to the stage on Clubhouse. And there's all these Cleveland people who many of them didn't know that there was this version. And so like, that's how I finally got connected to Mark. I had been trying to get Mark for, you know, through other people. I couldn't, you know, so I also want to just thank technology because technology also help like just find the research, but like staying with it and understanding the momentum. Sometimes you get a lot, sometimes you get a little, sometimes you go back, you ask other questions. So you have to be really curious. You have to take really good notes. And then you have to take notes on the culture and like connect the dots. Okay, so now the writer, he's from Cincinnati. So I got to know that Cincinnati is connected to funk. And, you know, so there's all these things that I did to try to bring the story, you know, to life.
And I like to say, Kelly, you did a really good job. I mean, we've talked a few times, and I know you did a lot of research, and then you then jumped on Clubhouse. But I think all your work paid off. It came together, and to make that connection between, you know, the songs and the groups and all of that, I think is fascinating, and it's music history. So, you know, bravo to you for what you did.
Great job.
I'll ask you one more question, Kelly. You mentioned word counts in the piece, right? You have to adhere to the word counts that the publication gives you. You can't tell all the stories that you wanted. What are some things that you wanted to discuss in the piece that you, because of word counts, were not able to do so in print?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to flesh out the African influence a lot more. And I wasn't really able to do that because, you kind of, with articles like that, you have to kind of get in and out. So that was one thing. And talking with Michael, he talked about how when they would travel to New Orleans, they would build in like a day before or after to hang out in New Orleans. There's the line in the article where Michael says there were some fine women, in New Orleans. Right. That New Orleans has some fine women. And I wanted to punch, he gave me more than what's in the article. So, I just had to kind of flirt with it that, there were some fine women, and, he told me there were some stories, and they had great times in New Orleans. So, I couldn't really drop that, and of course the Rebirth, X-rated lyrics, that was, I wanted to drop that in there in a soft way, I guess, but I guess there was no way to really drop it softly in there. So it was
no soft landing for that.
Yeah, so there was the editorial choice to not do that. But when the article came out, New Orleans folks were like, it wasn't as authentic as it should be because I left that out. So, I was like, hey, I wanted to put it in, but it got taken out. So,
that's funny.
So people started telling all kinds of other stories. So the more that I did research, the more stories started coming out about Casanova. And I think there was even a story about Tamia performing Casanova in New Orleans and how she was singing the LeVert version and the whole crowd was doing the New Orleans version. And there was like, that gif when Diddy is staring down the person. So like New Orleans is like, and Tamia is doing the other version. And so there was like a little bit of loss in translation there. But so some of those other things that I just couldn't get in.
Thank you for saying that about the Tamia performance. I was trying to remember who it was because that video went viral because Tamia was singing Casanova, but everyone in the audience, the New Orleans House of Blues, was singing the Rebirth version, and she was looking around like, "What is going on?" So we are right at about time. I want to give everyone the opportunity to leave us with some final thoughts that we should have on the song, on the legacy of the song, on the legacy of LeVert.
Well, I'll say that I appreciate Kelly doing the story. This is part of the journey, and I'm grateful for the journey and everything that we've been able to do. I think it's important, the linkage that she put together. I think it's important that we know our culture and we know where things originate and where it come from. And that even as far as going to the African drum, this is what's inspired the world, but we somehow get left out of the translation of the accolades and the history. And I think that us as a people need to know our history and know our culture and know where things come from. I think it would change the world as far as our world, our community, for the better if we had that connection. It's just a lot that's going on. And so it's hard to ignore some of the outside noise, but I think the music and the talk about culture and the things that bring us together needs to be talked about more. It needs to be talked about more to, just to try to make a better world for us as a community. So thanks for doing that. And,
And I would add on that, and just in total agreement, obviously, but you know, there's this thing, a friend of mine, it's a professor, calls the tyranny of European text. And what she means by that is all of the omissions of our culture that have happened in the world, where we have been the creators of things, and the stories that haven't been told. And so, you know, we are all fortunate to live in this time where there are all these untold stories that can be told. Now we have the medium to do it, we have the technology to do it, we have the technology to connect it, and we have, in my opinion, the obligation. And what's beautiful about the article and everything that all of you guys are doing is that you're making the connection to the root of it all, and the future generations that come along, that will be not only musicians but, you know, great orators and poets and speakers and the like, will be more connected to the origin of it all through this kind of thing, telling the stories around the music, listening to the music, dissecting it. That is going to be what accomplishes the goal that Mark just talked about, in terms of people knowing who they are and hearing the culture and feeling it more through music and words and all of it together. So I think it's very important to do this, because we now have an opportunity to tell our own stories. We don't have to wait for anybody else to tell the stories.
Yeah.
And the technology allows us to do that, but our desire to do it and the feeling that we get from doing it is going to drive it and make it bigger, because you feel better when you know these things, and this helps you know. So I agree 100%. And once again, hats off to Kelly for, you know, doing the article, and to this program too, because this is what it takes to keep getting it out there and making these connections and showing people just how connected we are.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Kelly, for the endeavor, for the undertaking of, you know, trying to find out more about the song. And I want to thank Mark and Michael Ferguson, the guys from LeVert, for putting that song together, making it one of our biggest hits. I want to thank DJ Soul Sister. I haven't seen you in a while. Great to see you. And I just want to tell you guys a story. We just played Cleveland, and like you guys said, we're so connected, but a lot of times we don't realize that we're playing the Gorg Shop. And the entire set I wasn't into. And these two black young ladies walk in, and the minute they heard the music, they started dancing, and it picked me up. We're in Cleveland, Ohio. It picked me up and just carried me the entire set. And I'm playing, and the whole time I'm playing, I'm watching them groove to the way I'm beating, and it just carried me. I said, you know what? We're more alike than we're not alike. And it's a beautiful thing that we're able to get together and talk about our similarities and things that can bring us together. And hopefully this is just the beginning of us being able to understand that we need to do this for the future of our legacy.
Yeah, it's great, man. Hey, can we say hey to Janice Lowe? I keep seeing her name pop up. She's a good friend of ours. So, hey, Janice, I don't know how to say hey back to you. But I hope you hear me.
Yeah, Janice is a great musician as well from Cleveland.
Absolutely.
Work in New York. For this whole research, this whole experience has really helped me embrace and broaden my definitions of home. I mean, I grew up in Cleveland, and I always say that I grew up in Cleveland, but I was raised as a woman in New Orleans, you know, and I don't choose between the two cities. Like my definition of home has just become more expansive, and how home kind of evolves, you know. So that was a great lesson for me in this journey. And so I think, you know, I would encourage people to find the stories of your home, you know. Melissa and I have talked, you know, often about the struggles and the obstacles of being women in the music industry. You know, we don't have enough women, you know, music writers. We don't have enough women archivists, as, you know, Melissa, the work you're doing. And so it's an opportunity to open the door wider for women. I see that as an opportunity as well out of all of this. But for me, you know, it just is a lesson on, like, I travel and so does music, right? And you never know how the music that you were raised on or that you love in your city is gonna, you know, be rebirthed, if you will, somewhere else. And so it's just been great to see it and be a part of it and experience it. So thank you. It's special for me to even be on this panel with Marc, because I was like young, knowing about LeVert, and to who knew, that we would connect, not in Cleveland, but in New Orleans. And Michael, thank you. And Keith, you jumped right in when I needed you to help, pull some of the other things together. And so thank you to Words and Music, the Jazz and Heritage Foundation. Also, thank you for their support of this project as well. So thank everybody. And thank you, Melissa, you did some work behind the scenes too to help me get it to the finish line. So thank you.
Well, I think those are the perfect words to end with. And thanks again to all the panelists and to all that joined us in the audience. Thanks to Words and Music. And I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I think that we can conclude here. And your homework is to go and listen to Casanova by LeVert and Rebirth Brass Band. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I've been doing that homework for a week now, and my sons are like, Mom, why are you playing that song again? Like, one day you'll understand, baby. One day. So I'm really excited to see one name keep popping up in the comments and question, and that name is Mona Lisa Saloy. She is the current poet laureate of Louisiana, and she will actually be closing out this festival at 6:00 Central Standard Time. But before Mona Lisa, at 4:30, we're going to come back and we're going to hear from some young writers just starting out. We've got a showcase of high school writers coming up at 4:30. So y'all take a little break, come back to the live stream at 4:30 and show the young writers some love, and get ready for Mona Lisa to close us out at 6. Thank you once again to Mr. Frazier, Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Gordon, Kelly, Melissa, who I'm calling by their first names, not because they're women, because I actually know them personally. Not internalized misogyny, just familiarity. I'll talk to y'all soon.